Welcome to Innovation Guelph presents Toolkit Tuesday. Today's session is called Best Practices for Finding and Getting Funding for Your Business. There's over $5.9 billion available in non-dilutive government funds to help you scale your business. So are you taking advantage of the resources available to you? This month's Toolkit Tuesday will teach you how to leverage the grant funding in your business to achieve hiring, research, development, market expansion, training, initiatives, objectives. Not all tools are created equal. And today, the Pocketed team will show you how to expedite the grant search and application process and increase your chances of receiving that funding. To experience today's presentation in American Sign Language, please pin or spotlight the presenters, Ben and Katherine, and both the interpreters, Carolyn and Roxanne, to the top of your gallery. And in addition, anyone in today's session can also access the Zoom closed caption function by clicking on the closed captioning option, likely on the bottom of your screen. So just in case anyone here doesn't know who I am Mickey Campo. I'm a program manager here at Innovation Guelph. If anyone doesn't know much about Innovation Guelph, I'll give you a little bit of a recap in just one moment, but I am really happy you all joined us here today. It's a pretty big crowd and we're excited to have you all here with us. I would like to do a quick thank you, a quick call out to all of our corporate sponsors, Ernst & Young, Miller Thompson, Reese Informatica, Invest in Guelph, and of course BDO. Thank you so much for the support in everything that we do. And again, a big thank you out to Sign Language Interpreting Associates for providing the ASL interpretation at our Toolkit Tuesday event. So thank you very much for joining us today. Just real quickly, before handing the screen over to Ben and Katherine, I just wanted to briefly introduce Innovation Guelph to you. We are one of 17 regional innovation centers here in Ontario. And while we're located here in Guelph, we actually serve the entire region of Southern Ontario, and we do have one national program. So we do help clients in all provinces across Canada and territories if there are any clients or companies out there looking for some assistance. We are definitely available to help you grow your business. That's what we do through programs and workshops, different networking opportunities. We do a trade show every year. Innovation Guelph is a wonderful place to come and have some mentorship and some guidance to help you grow your business. So I know you're here to all find about the grant funding. So I'm going to stop talking about Innovation Guelph and I'll introduce the speakers quickly. Just want to let you know that if you have any questions during today's session, just, type them out in the chat box. Jordan, who is somewhere on your screen, is also from Innovation Guelph, and Jordan will monitor and ask the questions whenever appropriate, and there'll be some Q&A time at the end of today's session as well. So lots of time for discussion and questions, but definitely ask them in the chat if you have them. So very quickly, I'll introduce Ben and Katherine to you, and then I'll hand things over. So Ben Walter, as a founding team member and partnership program manager at Pocketed, Ben currently manages the company's strategic alliance network, composed of over 120 accelerators, incubators, professional associations, and B2B service companies across Canada. With over $5.9 billion available to Canadian businesses every year through grant funding, tax credits, and competitions, his team is on a mission to power economic growth by democratizing access to non-dilutive funds. So that is Ben. And Katherine is also here today. And as Pocketed's customer success specialist, Katherine is the liaison between the world of non-dilutive funding and the company's 5,000 plus users. In addition to being the primary point of contact for all grant-related questions, the customer success team also performs the critical role of securing funding for their users through Pocketed's managed solution, which is a risk-free program that connects businesses with more funding quicker and with improved efficiency. So over to you, Ben and Katherine. I'll let you take over the screen and the call. Thanks so much.
Mickey, Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I love that. I'm just going to pop up my slides here. I'm just going to confirm that I'm bumping you off, and then we can pop that up. And thank you, Mickey and Jordan, for organizing this session today and inviting both myself and Catherine to present and chat with this fantastic group of folks. Super excited to see you all here today. I know we have a big group, which is kind of tough sometimes to get out for these online virtual webinars as we continue to kind of move through the years, as we all know. We were actually just chatting about this before we started the session today, how some in-person events have started up again, and I've been attending them over the past few weeks. And it's funny getting back to the small normalities, right? Business cards. I was at an event last week, and a ton of individuals came up after I gave my talk and said, "Hey Ben, I'd love to chat with you later about Pocketed. How can I connect with you? Do you have a business card?" Oh my gosh, 2 years, I don't have a business card. Completely forgot. So funny how things like that are still happening, but so excited to see so many of you here today, and very, very excited to chat all about non-dilutive funding, business funding for your business so that you can grow and scale successfully in 2022. And the great thing about a virtual conference is that I can drop as many links as I want in the chat, and you can easily click those links and go directly to the page. So no business cards or any paper necessary to do those things. So without further ado, let's kick things off. And I want to start with a little bit about you. So everybody on the call today, we want to know, who are you, right? What is your business? Where are you located? What industry you operate in? If you want to take a few minutes now and just drop that in the chat, right? So just 3 quick things, right? Business name, location, and industry. So we really get a sense of, the 54 folks that are on the call today and what you're doing in your business. So we'll give a second here so we see a few things popping in. Great. So Sharon, welcome from speakinspire.com. We've got Bex Broth from Kitchener. Natasha, we've got Mason Apothecare, Skincare Natural Cleaning in Oakville. We've got Gold Farm Canada in Guelph, Agriculture. Great, we've got a good program for you today that we're going to talk about. We've got more folks joining from Kitchener, from Guelph. Yeah, lots from Guelph, Kitchener, as expected. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. 3D home printing, that sounds cool. Dog treats, food, marketing. Wow, this is fantastic. I love this, right? Obviously, in this virtual world, we're able to see so many different individuals joining from so many different places and so many different businesses, right? Like, this is so exciting to see what everyone's doing. And this is something I really love about what we do here at Pocketed. We get to engage with so many unique businesses from all across Canada and the United States, North America. Everyone has their own vision of what they want to do, and the great thing is that non-dilutive funding can really be an asset to all of you, no matter what business you're running. So thank you for dropping that. That gives us a really good sense of who's in the room. And I think, yeah, Catherine will be going through some programs later today, and there's definitely going to be a program for every single one of you that you can potentially take advantage of. So before we kick into the deep content today, in terms of non-dilutive funding and all that good stuff, I want to start with a bit of a story. Who is Pocketed and where did we come from? So the past 12 months, right, we've been in business and on the market for about 12 months, have been pretty successful. We've seen a lot of growth. We've quadrupled our headcount. We've actually closed a funding round. And it's been a great journey, right? Over 5,000 users. I think Mickey already mentioned that earlier in Catherine's intro. But 24 months ago was a very, very different story for the founding team of Pocketed. We were actually building a completely separate business, and that business was a software business for restaurant retail. Now, as soon as you hear those words, restaurant retail, I'm sure all of you are going, okay, restaurant retail, 2020, beginning of the pandemic, not a great space to be in, right? We, at that time, we had paying customers in the US and Canada. We were making a good run in it. We were growing, we were scaling. And within a few days, right, pandemic hit, closures, mandatory stay-at-home orders, everything changed for us, right? That was the summer of 2020. And unfortunately, a lot of our customers were starting to kind of, say, we can't do this anymore, because they were closing their doors, right? Some of them were even filing for bankruptcy, and it had a massive impact on their business, which then in turn had a massive impact on our business. Now, I'm sure many of you also faced, similar stories in terms of, some kind of a decline in maybe, annual revenue, profit margins, maybe you had to lay off some employees. It was a tough time, right? Now, the cool thing for us was we were actually able to make a run at it for about 7 months after pandemic hit, right? Even though our users, our customers were starting to close their doors, the outlook, wasn't that great. We were still able to make a run at it. And the major, reason why we were able to do this was because we were leveraging non-dilutive funding, specifically grant funding, so heavily in our business. Our team had gotten really, really, really good at navigating the challenging and kind of overcomplicated space of grant funding. And so we had built our team on these funds, right? We weren't burning our own cash, and we were able to continue to build product and market product without having to burn our own cash, right? Now, obviously, we wouldn't be able to do this forever in terms of, 2021 didn't have a great outlook as well for restaurant retail, and we knew we had to make a pivot. And so we wanted to make a pivot into something that, helped other business owners like yourself, right? Others like us. And after having hundreds of conversations with our colleagues across Canada, founders, business owners, entrepreneurs, we realized that they were not leveraging non-dilutive funding as much as we were as an internal team, right? In the past 12 months, Pocketed has actually secured just about $500,000 in non-dilutive grant funding, which is insane, right? If you think about that and the impact that can have on your business, I mean, that's real impact, right? And there were three reoccurring struggles that really we uncovered in those conversations with these founders across Canada. And these were all things that we had also faced in our early days of trying to access this source of funding, right? Now, the first one was that locating grants is extremely challenging, right? I said this is an overcomplicated space. There's a lot out there, a lot of information, a lot of programs. On Pocketed, for example, we have over 1,000 programs available to you. And so this can be a challenge, especially when you have, time limitations as an entrepreneur and early stage founder. You've got a ton of additional things that you have to do to operate and build your business. And you may not have the time to actually allocate to seeking these out, especially if you're brand new to it. Now, the second piece is that requirements are unclear, right? So you spend all this upfront time searching out, okay, what's out there? How do I go about, finding these programs? How do I go about applying? Now, when you actually find the programs, you'll start to figure out that requirements may not always be super obvious, right? There are a ton of programs out there. MyTax is a great example of a program which is really fantastic for entrepreneurs, business owners to scale. And we've definitely leveraged MyTax in our businesses, but they intentionally do not put all of the information on their programs on their website. Now, that's in order to get you to connect with their team. Now, the thing is that makes it difficult for you, right? If you're time strapped, you want to just quickly find out information about the MyTax programs, for example, you may be searching for a lot longer, trying to email individuals, digging through multiple links just to find what you need to know if you can actually use those funds. And the third piece is that support is not always obvious, right? If you're brand new to grant funding, you may not know that there are, grant writers out there available, grant consultants that you can actually leverage to take a ton of the work off of your plate, right? And this is not always obvious. You may not know where to go and seek this out. We don't really know of, a centralized platform for that all the time. So these were the three key struggles that we really wanted to address to make non-dilutive funding more accessible to all founders and entrepreneurs. And that's why we launched Pocketed. So Pocketed is a simplified way to access non-dilutive funding, right? Grants, tax credits, business competitions. And it's really kind of an update on a dated industry, right? When we look at the industry, we see a lot of government websites, a lot of old websites that have a ton of information that's decentralized. And we wanted to make it a lot easier for individuals like you to actually navigate the space and secure funds for your business so that you can continue to scale and grow. So that's the story of Pocketed. And now I'm going to switch over and pass it off to Katherine, and she is going to run us through today's agenda.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. So like Ben said, I'm just going to quickly run us through today's agenda so that we all know what's on the menu for today and what to expect. So first up, we're going to be taking a look at the Canadian grant landscape just to give you some background on what's out there and what's available for your specific business. Next up, and actually one of my personal favorites, is we're going to be debunking some common grant misconceptions that we hear way too often. Following this, we'll take a look at how to actually apply for grant funding and key things to keep front and center when you are looking to start applying. Next, we'll give you a further introduction to Pocketed, a little bit of a deeper dive. We'll talk about specifically how Pocketed helps our users secure funding to reach their business goals. And finally, we will open it up to some Q&A. That being said, like Mickey said before, if anybody has questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, perfect. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd actually love to hear from you. And you can all answer this by either just popping an emoji in the chat or putting your answer in the chat. But has anybody here actually ever utilized grant funding before? Laura has. Amazing. Jacob has not. I see quite a few yeses coming in. That's amazing. Kate says many times. A couple no's. It looks like we're pretty split here. Rebecca says it's been so helpful. It's been very helpful to pocket it as well, Rebecca, and all of our users as well. Perfect, amazing. So a couple of you have a little bit of background on what's out there, and you've been able to use some grant funding, which is great. And maybe this will just be a refresher for you and will help you access more grant funding. Wow, Sharon won $6 million in government funding. Amazing. Perfect. Okay, thanks for sharing, everybody. So before we jump directly into the wonderful world of grants, we're going to take a brief look at the different types of funding that can be used to fund your business. So things other than grant funding. So first up, we've got our loans. These are great because they give you direct access to capital, and they have little restraints on how you actually use that capital. So you're free to use it as you see fit to grow your business. The downside to them, however, is that there can be complicated hoops for you to jump through in order to qualify for the loan. And not only do you have to pay back the loan, but you have to actually pay it back with interest. Next, we've got our friends and family. This can definitely be an easier way to obtain funding, as friends and family will usually take your word at face value and not require you to fill out any application because hopefully they love, trust, and know you well. But there is a downside to using friends and family to fund your business. One is that your friends and family may not be well equipped to deal with any potential loss that you could incur, and they may not be able to navigate that space very well. So you're carrying this weight on your shoulders, and that can definitely be very stressful and can just add to your plate as a new-time entrepreneur. So thirdly, we've got crowdfunding. As the name suggests, this is typically where you raise money from a large number of people. Nowadays, with the wonderful world of technology, it's typically done through the internet. Think of GoFundMe or Kickstarter. These are great ways in that it can be a quick way to get cash with little to no upfront fee. However, do be mindful that a lot of the platforms will charge a fee if you do utilize them. And it also serves as a marketing tool as it gets your name out there. If you are crowdfunding on the internet for an idea, however, one downside is that you do have to be mindful and keep your idea patented as there is a risk there. Another downside to traditional crowdfunding is that it can take quite a bit of time. And finally, we've got our investors. The great thing about investors is that, like a loan, it gives you access to capital that you can use to grow your business. Even better, unlike a loan, you don't have to have a proven credit history to qualify for it. The downside, however, is that you are giving up a stake in your company and you could potentially lose some control. Perfect. So next up, we're going to jump into the Canadian grant landscape. This will just give you an overview of what's out there and how you can use it. So like Mickey said earlier, there's actually $5.9 billion available in annual government funding. That's massive. That's almost $6 billion. Hopefully after this presentation, you'll all feel a little bit more confident to go either grab a piece of that pie or continue building your business using that money. I'll now hand it off to Ben to dive a little bit deeper into the grant landscape.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Catherine. And I always love seeing that number. It's so exciting when we see billion in anything. I mean, you're like, wow. And then when you realize that you can actually take advantage of some of these funds, right? Pocket $500,000. That's a ton of funding. So super, super exciting. So I know that we have a good mix of those who have secured grants before and those who haven't. So thanks, Catherine, for clarifying that in the chat with everybody. But yeah, definitely for those who are brand new to it, this is going to be very helpful for you. We're just going to go over the basics. And so what are grants, right? So simply put, grants are a form of non-dilutive capital, non-debt, non-equity capital to help grow your business, right? So non-dilutive means that you're not giving up any equity stake in your business. Like Catherine was talking about, some of the other funding sources like, third-party investors, even sometimes crowdfunding. You may be crowdfunding on an equity round. You may need to give up some control and some ownership of your business. And this can have its downsides. Obviously, you're losing ownership, but also in early days, if you're trying to get some funding just to start and you are diluting, then that can have some impact later on when you are approaching your first round with investors. So obviously great. You don't have to pay it back. You don't have to give up ownership in your business. It's really a third-party source of capital to basically, put into your business and grow your business with. Now we've seen how much there is. We've just learned that it's non-equity, non-debt. So why does this source of funding exist, right? And who is it coming from? So grant funding is coming from the federal, municipal, provincial level governments, and it is really their priority, right, to stimulate economic development within our country, right? So there's a ton of funding out there. We'll talk about what kind of grant programs there are, but definitely, like, using grants, the government can stimulate job growth, they can stimulate export growth, they can stimulate research and development. So if you are an innovative business, right, and you are building a better future for Canadians, for the Canadian economy, grant funding is a good way, for the government to basically induce some capital, inject some capital into your business, if you have eligible projects going on, to help spark some economic development across the country. So that's why it exists for you to take advantage of. And we talk, about grant funding. We talk about government funding. That may ring some bells in your mind. Are grants tax credits, right? Sometimes we associate tax credits with government funding. No, they are not. That is a simple answer. They are completely separate. They are both non-dilutive, which is great. And the cool thing is you can actually leverage both for your business. So through Pocketed, you can both secure a grant and a tax credit. You can use them within the same fiscal year to cover more costs in your business. And there are some really great tax credit programs out there. We're not going to be talking too much about tax credits today, but we do have a ton on our platform. Some of the big ones like Shred is a really popular platform that we help connect a ton of our businesses with. So if you'd like more information and to chat more about tax credits, you can definitely reach out to our team, and obviously we'll have our contact info at the end. But I just want to make that clarification that no, grants are not tax credits. Now, what are the main types of grants, right? So there are 4 core categories of grant funding opportunities, and we see them on the slide there. There's also a special 5th category, very current with the times. So the 4 core categories are research and development, or R&D, hiring, training, and then market expansion, right? So we can see that all 4 of these are very much project-based. So depending on the projects that you're executing in your business, you'll likely be able to associate that project with one of these categories, right? Now, the special 5th category is COVID-19 recovery. There are a number of programs that are available and have been available over the past 2 years, through wage subsidies, those types of things, equipment subsidies, and that's special. So it won't be around forever. But the 4 core categories definitely will remain in place. And this is a great way to start your grant search. When you're just starting out and you're not sure where exactly you should start, think about the projects that you're running in your business, and you can actually use that to narrow down your search at step 1.
Question for you, Ben.
Yes.
Do grants count as business income?
Yes, they do. So grants are taxable. So you'll have to note that at the end of year. And so that yes, that is a very good clarifying questions to ask. Perfect. Oh, and I'm just checking the chat now, Allison. Yes, and sometimes privately. You're totally right. Yeah, so federal, provincial, municipal, private, and we have private programs available as well. Thank you for catching that. Okay, so how does grant funding work, right? So we'll do kind of a broad structure here. So first, you're going to identify a project that you'd like to fund at your business. So let's say maybe you want to hire an employee, a student intern. We're approaching the summer month, and so maybe you want to bring on a marketing intern to help drum up some business over the summer for you. So that's step 1, identify a project. Now, step 2 is going to be identifying a program that works for you, right? So a funding program that actually is going to be able to pay for the project that you'd like to execute. Now you're going to apply, you're going to be approved for that funding, and then you're going to actually execute the project. So with grant funding, you're typically, now there are some programs that will give you cash up front, but you typically will need to execute the project on your own dollar, and then you'll be reimbursed halfway or at the end of the project lifetime. So if you're hiring a student, for example, you would need that cash today to pay for their wages. And then maybe halfway through, their 4 months with you, or at the end of those 4 months, you would be submitting documentation so that you can be reimbursed for a portion or all of those expenses that you've incurred. So that's an important thing to recognize, right? We talk about grant funding as being a great source for early stage, entrepreneurs, but you do need to have that cash. So obviously, if that's a barrier for you, the good thing is we have resources to help you with that. But definitely something to keep in mind if you're early days. Okay, so I want to pose this question back to the group. I know that we have a ton of individuals who have secured grants before, which is fantastic. When do you think is the right time to be applying for grants in your business? I'm going to keep it very, very broad, but I'd love to see some ideas in the chat.
While the ideas are coming in, Ben, we have another question about the last slide that we were on.
Yes.
So how can reimbursement be guaranteed? What if requirements are not met for whatever reason?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. If the grants, so we've had one case that I know of where a user was incorrectly approved for a funding opportunity, and they brought on an employee, and then they were told, okay, we incorrectly approved you. This is the situation. Now, in that case, we were actually able to sort out funding for them, so it was no problem. But generally, there's not a lot of risk with this. The application process and the approval process up front is going to be pretty solid. You'll know the requirements of the program, especially if you're leveraging Pocket's application support. Will ensure that you also are applicable for that opportunity. And then obviously it's going to be reviewed up front. So they'll let you know, right? If you don't have an eligible project, they will let you know. And in the very rare case, right, we have over 5,500 users. About that, one user I know of, only one who has had an issue with approval being kind of taken back halfway through. So as long as you're ensuring that you're providing the correct information up front, and that was the issue in this case, they had provided some incorrect information, then you're solid. Okay, so we've got some good answers. So Sharon says now. Yes, Sharon, you are right. Allison, before spending a cent, beginning of the fiscal year, before a project begins, the planning stage. Yeah, no, this is all great. So these are all correct answers. And the answer that I have for everybody is if you need funds, it's time, right? So anytime in the year, anytime you need some extra capital in your business, whether you're pre-rev, Series C, any industry, it is the right time to apply for grant funding. And actually, the cool thing is I saw some of the answers were like before you spend, those types of things. There are some programs that you can actually apply to and be retroactively funded. So the DS4Y program, for example, which was open for applications in January, was funding positions from the end, so Q4 of 2021. So definitely some opportunities, even if you already have spent some money, to get some money back using a grant program, right? And typically, if we think in that structure, we're like, oh, it sounds like a tax credit, but no, it is a grant program. So you can actually do that. But definitely, no matter what stage, in your journey you are, no matter what industry you're operating in, it is time to apply if you need that funding. And the thing to focus on is projects, right? And so I know a lot of you had dropped that in the chat that, when you're in the planning stage of a project, when you're just about to start a project. So that's totally right. Like when you have a project that you need funding for, that is definitely the time to apply. And I see we have a question as well. Could the categories be mixed for a grant, or should they be presented separately? So Pablo, I believe you're talking about like categories, like project categories. So if it is like an intensive project, so typically like a market expansion grant is going to get you funding for a variety of project activities. So a market expansion grant would get you funding for like research for your new market, some travel expenses, some marketing expenses. So a program like that will cover, multiple project activities. But if you're looking at like, you've got an R&D project and you've got a hiring project, like those would be separate, and you'd want to look at each individual category, right? Like most of the time, the R&D is going to be focused on R&D, hiring will be focused on hiring. Market expansion is really the only one that's going to cover a variety of project activities. So I think, and I hope that addresses that question. If you were asking something else, then just drop in the chat and let us know. Okay, so now that we've clarified when it's the right time to apply, I'm going to pass it back to Katherine, and she's actually going to go through 4 programs that all of you can leverage today in your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. So we often get a lot of questions from users, primarily being what they should apply for. We get a lot of questions from users about grants for tech-related companies specifically, but also just tech in general. One of my personal favorite grants to recommend is Career Ready by TechNation. I really like this grant. It is a hiring grant that offers support for both students and businesses alike, which is why it's one of my personal favorites, because it gives money for businesses to hire students. So not only is it helping companies, but it's also helping students who are trying to break into the workforce and trying to break into the IT sector specifically, which I'm not sure if anyone here has ever tried to break into the IT sector. I know I haven't, but I've heard from friends and family that it can be really difficult to do. So I really like the fact that this supports both sides of the coin. So in terms of eligibility, it's also really straightforward, which is another reason why it's one of our go-tos. So in terms of the company that's applying for the grant, you just need to be a registered Canadian business with the ability to provide a tech-focused role for the employee that you're going to be funding through this. And then as for the employee just needs to be a student at an accredited Canadian university or college. And this grant here offers up to $7,000 in wage subsidy. As for applications and when you should get them in, Career Ready does have accept applications on a rolling basis, and typically it's separated by winter, spring, summer, and fall terms. Perfect. So next up, we always also get a lot of questions out there for what's available to companies that are just starting out and are trying to get the ball rolling. Well, there's a lot of options out there. As Ben mentioned, export grants, or market expansion grants as they're also known, are a great way because they cover a variety of costs that you need to break into a market. One particular grant is the CanExport, and I may butcher this, SME, as I like to call it for fun, but SME just actually stands for small to medium enterprises. So this here offers up to $75,000, and it provides funding to small and medium-sized enterprises that are registered in Canada for international business development activities. The eligibility for this is also quite straightforward. You need to be a for-profit incorporated legal entity in Canada, meaning you would need to have a Canadian Revenue Agency business number, and you have to have fewer than 500 full-time employees. Perfect. So we've got a lot of users in the AgriTech field, which is, for me, is very interesting because I never had any experience with anybody in the AgriTech field until I started working from Pocketed. So it's been a learning experience for me, which is great. One particular program that offers up to $50,000 for people in the AgriTech world is the Agri Assurance Program. So this funds projects to help businesses in that field develop systems and standards and tools that will support health and safety claims about Canadian agricultural products specifically. The eligibility for this is that, again, the company that's applying needs to be a for-profit organization, and it needs to be operating in the agriculture, agri-food, and agri-based products sector. This would include fish and seafood. Perfect. So next up, a lot of our users are female founders, and in fact, Pocketed is founded itself by 2 women, which is amazing. So we get a lot of questions about what's out there for female founders, and there is a lot out there. I would direct you to the Canadian Women's Foundation. This organization as a whole has so many different programs that are out there to support women in business and just honestly women in general. At the moment, they have a current grant called the Economic Development Grants. This is open until April 14th, so the deadline is coming up pretty quickly if any women out there are interested in this. This grant here supports organizations that offer programs for women, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people in a couple of different areas. So that would be for self-employed and business acceleration, workplace navigation and inclusion, trades and technology, and networking. So in terms of eligibility for this grant, pretty straightforward. You just need to be a women or gender justice organization that is a registered charity. So it is for charities only. Perfect. And I'll just stop here to see if there are any questions before we move on to some grant myths.
Thanks, Catherine. We do have a couple questions. I'm going to go back to about the AgriTech grant. Would wine production be considered AgriTech?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say yes, but Ben, do you have any thoughts on that? My instinct would be to say yes.
Yeah, I think that wine is covered. From what I recall right now on this session, but Marta, we can follow up as well. We can just check in with the CS team and just confirm that for you. So we'll send a follow up. But for now, say yes, because I'm pretty sure I called it is.
Excellent. I will just say we'll save very specific questions for is my business covered under a grant. We will save those, as Ben mentioned, in the chat for the end, but a specific question for the CanExport grant. Are expansion projects necessarily export related? Is it possible to get grants for market expansion that focus on intra-provincial commerce?
Yeah, great question, Jacob. So if I'm understanding correctly, I think you're asking about whether export grants are to reach international markets specifically. To answer your question, it is definitely possible to get grants to reach a market within Canada. So whether that's going to just a new provincial market or a new demographic market. So yes, there are definitely a lot of grants available for that.
Would a product made in Canada for the agriculture sector but using imported raw materials qualify for the Agri-Assurance program?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brad. If you'd like, it may be better to get in touch with us afterwards. We'll drop our emails in the chat, but just so we can have a little bit more in-depth understanding of your business, just because there's a lot of different factors that could come into play.
Excellent. And I'll do this as the last question, and then we'll move on and resume in a couple slides for questions. So is the Agri-Assurance program suitable for pre-revenue AgriTech startups to market expansion?
Yeah, so it is for small enterprises. If you are pre-revenue, there's a lot of options out there. This one here is for a small business, but you do have to have a little bit of income. So I would recommend looking at other CanExport grants as well. CanExport has a ton of different programs underneath of them, and they have a lot of friendly grants for companies that are pre-revenue specifically.
Okay, awesome. There are other questions. I'm not sure if you want to go through them all now, Catherine. They're coming in fast and furious.
Yeah, I see that. Lots of questions. Just reading through them now.
Okay.
Quite helpful. Oh, thanks for sharing, Allison. She found a tool for all of us to use. If we could save these questions just for the Q&A so we can touch on grant myths and the other portions of the presentation, that would be great if that's okay with everybody here.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll keep track of ones that were left unanswered so you can go ahead.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, time for my favorite part, and that is grant myths. So we're going to talk about all the things that we hear way too often that people think are barriers to grant funding and that are simply not true. Okay, so the first myth that we hear way too often is that grants have too many strings attached and are just too complicated. And yes, it is true that you have to report some project updates to grant agencies, but you really do have a lot of freedom when you're working with grant funding. You get to choose the products you're working on, you get to choose the grants that you apply to, you're not held accountable by investing third parties who are expecting a return on their capital, and also you're not obligated to spend all or any of the grant funding that you secure if you can't find an applicable use. So for example, like with hiring grants, if you secure a hiring grant for, let's say, for example, a marketing coordinator or a very specific role, you're not obligated to use that if you can't fill that role. Perfect. Okay, so the second myth, and one that leaves a lot of funding on the table for businesses, is that grants cannot be stacked. What stacking means is that basically you're securing 2 or more grants for one particular project, And this is not true. You can definitely stack grants, and it's actually a very good strategy when you're applying for grant funding. So as Ben mentioned earlier, grants are offered at the federal, provincial, municipal, and private level. And as long as you're sourcing grants from each of these, you can combine them to cover a greater total project cost. So for example, you could have a federal and a provincial grant to fund the salary of your marketing coordinator, but you could not have two federal grants to fund your marketing coordinator. Perfect. So the third myth that we're going to go over is that if you're not in tech, there are no grants available to you. And that is completely false. While admittedly a significant portion of Canadian grant funding is centered around technical projects, you don't actually have to be a technological company to access the funding. So think about the common projects that were taken on over the pandemic. So there was shifting to online marketplaces, there was revamping websites, there was bringing on a qualified individual to execute these tasks, working remotely. So many different projects that took place that were digital, and you didn't need to be a tech company to do these. There are also a ton of grants out there for eco-based projects. Like we said, there's grants out there for people in the agriculture industry, and so many more. So to simply paint grant funding with one brush and write it off as only tech is just too limiting, and is not true. Perfect. Okay, the fourth and final myth that we're going to go over is that grants are only for big folks. This couldn't be further from the truth. While there are some grants that cater towards more established companies, there are also a lot of grants that are geared towards smaller companies. So government grants are available to businesses of all sizes. Does anybody have any questions before I hand this over to Ben to talk about a few tips and tricks to apply for funding?
I do have a question about the myths you went through. So Jacob asks, do some grants have limitations on stacking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you are going to be stacking grants, of course, you need to be mindful that you can't get more than 100% of the project funded. But as long as you're stacking it from those different sources, there's no problem there.
Yeah, and some programs will specifically state if they cannot be stacked. So definitely like keep an eye out for that, and that will all be like listed for you in advance, especially like on the Pocketed platform. We'll let you know that. Cool. So maybe I'll just take over, Katherine, now to transition to tips and tricks. Also, sorry about the slides there. I was trying to type a message into the chat, and then for some reason, all of a sudden, Zoom just like took over my keyboard and just started switching the slides when I was trying to type. But anyways, I guess I am not able to type in the chat anymore. Okay, so let's hop into some tips and tricks to win. So actually to secure funding. So the first thing that you'll want is know what you need. So know the basics of your business for the application, know the basic requirements of the actual program that you are applying to. This is all super important. Obviously, you will not be able to apply if you don't have this information, and it is self-explanatory. But definitely, you know, we say this because there are some good ways to go about it, right? I usually say make a centralized document or folder in your company that's basically, you know, grant applications information, right? So you can have things like your, you know, CRA registered business number, you know, basic company things like your company address, phone number, just very accessible, so that when your team or yourself, you know, you're applying to these programs moving forward, you can easily find that information. You don't have to, you know, take that time to seek it out, right? If you bring on, you know, maybe a junior coordinator or something, and you want them applying for you, you don't want them reaching out for all this basic information. So just knowing what you need so that you can be prepared for success. And the second piece is to actually apply early. And this can actually have a major impact on your likelihood of success when you're dealing with non-competitive programs. So there's two kind of types of programs here: competitive, non-competitive. Competitive, those are typically going to be, you know, your bigger programs, your market expansion, research and development. They're actually going to be evaluating your project, you know, in comparison to others that are submitted, in terms of, do they want to give you this funding, right? Are you making a big enough impact? Is your project relevant enough to what they want to see happen in the economy? That's competitive, right? Non-competitive programs have a set, you know, they have a pool of funding, and they basically say, okay, it's open, it's available. If you have an eligible project, you will be approved. And so applying early makes a difference, right? Because basically that funding will be available until it's all been claimed. And so the earlier you apply with your project and you get approved for that funding, obviously you're increasing your chances of success. And the longer you wait, the less likely it'll be you actually secure, a portion of those funds or some of those funds. So applying early definitely can make an impact for you. Now, the third tip is to stay ahead of deadlines. And we can see this is very much related, to applying early, right? Staying ahead of deadlines is important. And there's 3 key deadlines that I typically say you should keep in mind. So 1, when are new programs being announced? So this is going to allow you to prepare your application in advance, right? Know what's out there, know what's available to you. The second one, when application portals open. So obviously if a program's announced and they say it's going to open on like April 1st, for example, knowing that it's going to open on April 1st is going to allow you to apply early, right? If you know when it opens and you prepared in advance, then you can submit right away. The third deadline is obviously the closing deadline. So for non-competitive, this is not really relevant, but for competitive programs, it is, right? So if you're putting a ton of work into an application for, CanExport, for example, you will want to know when is that closing deadline so that I make sure I get my application in and I'm not missing out on this funding. And the fourth and final piece here is to hire experts. So if you're brand new to the process, even for all of you who have secured a grant before, if you don't have the time, you don't want to allocate the time towards actually applying and securing these funds, there is a ton of expert knowledge out there that you can actually leverage to help you write those programs, right? Grant writers are our most popular service offering here at Pocketed, and that will allow you to actually take the work off your plate and have a professional write that application for you so that you don't have to worry about it and you can take back time for those important, everyday operational items to grow your business. And I totally lied to you. My final tip is to use Pocketed, right? Okay, it's coming from me, founding team Pocketed member, but Pocketed will help you with everything we've talked about today, right? So 5.9 billion is accessible through Pocketed. All of these tips that I said in terms of staying ahead of deadlines, applying early, hiring experts, you can access all of this through Pocketed. And the great thing is it's totally free to sign up. You're going to match with available opportunities. And I'm going to come back to the platform. We're going to do a quick walkthrough. But before we get to that, Katherine is actually going to quickly run us through applying to grants, a few considerations, and also, when hiring a grant writer is the right move.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. So I know some of you already have experience with applying for grant funding, but I just love to go over different things that you need to consider before you submit your application, and then the basics of documentation and details that you'll actually need to submit a grant application. Okay, so first up, before you actually start applying, it's a good idea to take some time to consider a few things that are going to help you decide whether the grant you're looking at is a right application for you. So the first thing to consider is the time investment. Is this a quick application with quick results, or is this going to be a huge time commitment? Make sure you know how long the application will take and actually when you can expect to hear back about the status of the application, because you do want to make sure that this time is in line with the timing of your project. Next up, make sure you understand the nuances of the grants. What type of company is this geared towards, and for what type of purpose or project? Does this align with your business and your business goals? And then how strong is your knowledge of funding in general? And is there any outside business relationship you can use to leverage and guide you with your grant application? Finally, make sure you thoroughly understand the application stages and the documents that you're going to need in order to submit your application so you can prepare this ahead of time. A tip from us is a lot of applications require some of the bare minimum information that's the same. So gather this all in one place so that you can access it very easily when you're applying for multiple grants. Okay, next up, we're going to cover what you need to submit an application. So generally speaking, when applying for grants, you need a business number, which you'll get from CRA. You need a compelling company description, your company address, your contact information, of course, so that they can update you with the status of your application. You'll need your date of registration or incorporation. Basically, all of this information is to show that your business is in fact a legal company and registered in Canada. Okay, so for our busy entrepreneurs, you'll be happy to know that support is out there. But how do you know when you should actually take advantage of that support and hire and engage a grant writer rather than taking on the grant application yourself? Well, to answer that question, I would actually turn to you with 3 questions. What is your grant experience so far? What is your capacity? Grant applications take time, and do you realistically have that time commitment to put forward an application? Thirdly, what is your budget, and does a grant writer fit within that budget? Something else to consider, and more importantly, however, is can you afford to not hire a grant writer? The reason we ask that is because grant applications can be very time consuming, and not to sound too corny here, but time is money, and this is even more true for entrepreneurs. So could the time that you would spend on the application be better used elsewhere to support and grow your business? Wonderful. Just another check-in again. Do we have any questions? Perfect.
We have someone's hand raised. Zamira?
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Hi,
I have-
Maria.
Hi. So I would like to know first, can you apply as an individual, not as a business? Like if you have a project, like an event?
If you're a
Really-
sole proprietor, oh, sorry, Catherine.
No, go for it, Ben.
I was going to say, and Catherine, you please feel free to build on this, but I was going to say, yes, like if you're a sole proprietor, you can definitely apply for grant funding for your business. But if you have like a private project, the funding that we have on Pocketed may not be the right grant funding for you, primarily business funding and funding for nonprofits. But Catherine, sorry, I totally cut you off. Maybe you want to expand more on that.
No worries. You got it, Ben.
So if you have a business and but you have an event that maybe it's not like very related to your business, but you apply through the business for the event, is that possible?
Yes. Sorry, I'll hop in again, Catherine. I'd say yes. I'd say if you want a very specific answer, we can have another follow-up chat. Maybe we can book a meeting. But there are definitely ways to like structure an application for funding or for grant funding. It can help like increase, your likelihood of securing those funds, right? That's why we kind of talk about, like Catherine speaks about your experience, your capacity, your budget. Like each of these things is very important. It's also very important to recognize that, working with a professional grant writer, they're going to be able to, write the application in a certain way that is going to improve your chances of success. And that's kind of what Catherine was talking about when she said, nuances of just the language that's being used. So it's possible that you could secure funding for a project using, your business entity. Although if it's totally unrelated, like if it's like a personal project that is like not at all impacting your business, then you may run into some challenges there.
Okay, our next question, is there a typical cost for a grant writer per application, or can you give us a ballpark or why that might vary?
Yeah, definitely. So the cost of a grant writer does vary depending on what type of grant you're applying for, their experience. A lot of grant writers do have friendly founder payments, but typically the structure of the grant writer fee is either a flat fee that you pay hourly, or a flat fee for a project, or a contingency-based fee, which would be a percentage of the awarded grant value if successfully awarded. And then the flat fee, it really varies depending on the grant writer that you're working for. Typically, it can range from anything, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but anything between $100 to $250 an hour. And then the percentage varies a lot depending on the amount of the grant that you're applying for.
Follow-up question. I'm getting some direct, so you might not see them in the chat. I'm going to go to Alina's question. Are there grants available for nonprofits who are in the idea stage, keeping in mind it takes a while to obtain a charitable status? So are there grants available while you're still trying to get charitable status?
Yeah, that's a really good specific question. Yes, there definitely are grants available to people who are in that stage. If you would like, we can definitely follow up with you, Alina, and just have a little bit more discussion about your specific charity that you're trying to start and see what we can leverage for you.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Catherine. Like, this really comes back to our point of like, start with the projects that you want to execute, right? So like, what do you actually need the funding for? Like, are you looking in these early days of your nonprofit to like expand your team a little bit, get some support on that front? If that's the case, for sure, there are opportunities that you can leverage. So that's just something to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely.
Thank you. Are there grants available for grant writers?
That's a really good question. So a lot of people, when they are leveraging a grant writer, they go in thinking that they can use the awarded grant to pay for that grant writer. And unfortunately, generally speaking, you can't use the awarded grant money that you get for anything other than the purpose of that grant. So if it were a hiring grant, it would need to go towards that person's salary. However, there are some specific grants that will allow you to apply to get assistance to apply for the grant if you need that assistance. But that would be an application that you need to put forward.
Excellent. We're getting some people who have to leave as they have 1 p.m. That's totally fine. You'll get a link to the recording of this session and follow-up slides and links from the pocketed team towards the end of the week. So I'll say that now. Some grants have limitations on portions being paid to grant writers. I think you might have just answered that question too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if money is coming into your incorporation from some consultancy work at the moment, but you want to apply for grants for the tech business you're building, will the money coming in from other sources count, or is that still considered pre-revenue?
So that really depends. The grant will, whichever grant you're applying for, will specify what they consider to be pre-revenue. So typically they'll have your annual revenue has to be less than this to be considered pre-revenue, but that is something that you would want to look at when you're applying for the specific grant because it can vary across grants. I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. I'll let them follow up in the chat if it doesn't answer the question. Based on the last question, I think this is for the nonprofit question. I'm building a for-profit share co-op and I'm putting together the steering committee. Are there grants for this stage?
Yeah, definitely. There are most definitely grants for that stage. Again, very specific question and super exciting to hear about that. If you'd like, we can connect further after this call just to discuss potential grants for that particular case.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the other questions coming in now are those highly specific situations. So we'll just put it out there that we'll continue with the slides. We'll get to the questions that we can. And then if there are those specific ones, we can connect you with the pocketed team to continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Sorry, just going to say handing it off to Ben.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And recognize, some folks have to pop off now for afternoon meetings, which is great. So thanks so much if you have to hop out now, but we still have a little bit more content for all of you who can stick around here today. And I know, we've been having questions throughout, so we'll run a little bit longer on the content side, and we'll continue up with some questions at the end. So just want to kick things off before I hop into the platform demo with a case study. So Ada, co-founder of unclear from Vancouver, BC over here. Ada was actually able to secure $112,000 using Pocketed. This was in 120 days after signing up. So, a quote from here we can see on the screen, really, she was able to access funding that she wasn't aware was, available to her. And this allowed her, the 112 allowed her to scale her team, bring on some great talent, and obviously drive the business forward. Obviously, unclear is a successful business, but this was just that extra boost to, provide some support in her growth. And she continues to leverage the platform and the funding today. So now I'm going to hop over and actually show you the fantastic tool that is Pocketed, so that you can all sign up and leverage the funding opportunities that are available to you. So the first thing, I already dropped a link in the chat. That is the sign up link, and I'm going to drop it just one more time here. This will allow you to create a free account, which will connect you with eligible funding opportunities for your business. So everything that you match with once you sign up is actually going to be specific to your business. Now, it won't be specific to the projects you're executing, but it will be specific to your business. And then as we'll see now, there's some filtering capabilities to narrow it down. So that is the referral code. It'll actually provide a special link, automatically applies Innovation Guelph link. We'll talk about what that means. But for now, I'm just going to sign into my account and start a new screen share here for you all. Okay, so this is pocketed. As we can see, I have a pop-up when I log in. But I've already built my account, right? So I've signed in, built my business profile, and this is the welcome dashboard. So we're going to see a few things, right? We're going to see explore grants, talk to an advisor, and apply for grant-based financing. Now, the most exciting thing, place where everyone is going to want to go to, is the explore grants page, which will take you to your grants dashboard. Now, this is also accessible in the left-hand navigation bar at any point in time. Now, this is where you're going to see all of those applicable eligible programs for your business, right? So once we sign up, and in the sign up process, we're going to build out a business profile. So we're going to provide some basic information on our businesses. This is where we'll see what programs are available to me. So for my business profile, I have 155 funding opportunities that I can potentially take advantage of, which is super exciting, right? 155 funding opportunities that I may not have known about before today. So obviously that is going to be very exciting for me as a business owner. Now, if I want to look at any single one of these programs, all I have to do is click into it and I'll see all the information that I need to actually feel confident and comfortable in seeking out and applying to these programs, right? So I see a My Tax program here. We mentioned My Tax earlier today. If I click in, I can see how much funding is there. When's the deadline, if there is a deadline, about the program, right? Eligibility criteria. So all of those things that we were talking about that are super, super important for you to feel comfortable and confident to apply. Now, if you'd like to apply on your own, all you have to do is once you find the program you want to apply to is click that apply button. Super simple. And the great thing is if you use what we've seen on screen here so far in terms of signing up, finding a program and applying, completely free. You don't have to pay anything to anybody and you can secure funding for your business. Now I'll come back to the Hire a Grant Writer button in 1 second, but I want to show you how to narrow down this list so that you can actually see programs that are eligible to your projects that you're executing. So first of all, we have our search bar, so we can search for any specific program. So if we wanted to find, the Shred tax credit program, for example, great, I've matched with it. There it is. I can go and learn more about it. Now we can also filter our results to see a narrower list or a smaller list of opportunities for the projects we're executing. So of course, we have some of our our sort filters, sort lowest highest, those types of things, application length. Now, the really good stuff is in the all filters tab. Now, this is where we can actually narrow it down by grant type or project type, funding type, and then some further filters beyond that. So let's say we are expanding to a new market. We only want to look at market expansion funding. We click on this and my list is narrowed down to 43 programs, right? So I've eliminated over 100 opportunities for my business. And now I can really focus on those that are specific to my project and my business. Now, everything up until this point here is free to use. Candidate requirements, role types, these are the additional filters that are available once you click on the grant type. Those are actually part of our Pocketed Plus tier. This is an upgraded version of the platform, which gets you access to more features like advanced filtering, unlimited grant consultations, these types of things. So those would be locked out if you do have a free account, but everything else so far, all of these filters, the search and viewing any programs is free to use. And the cool thing is the Innovation Guelph X code, which will automatically be applied to your account if you use the link we shared, will get you a discount. So it'll actually get you a 25% discount on upgrades to Pocketed Plus, which is pretty cool. Okay, so back to this screen here. We have two other buttons. Finance this grant button, that is going to be if you don't have the cash today to use for the project. And the Hire a Grant button, Hire a Grant Writer button, sorry, bright pink. Obviously, it's the most popular button for our users. That's where you can connect with professional support to actually write and apply for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, you can also save programs for later. They'll be accessible here. And the final thing I want to point out when we're on the platform is actually where you can make changes to your grant profile. So if you come under account settings and you go to grant profile, this is where you'll actually be able to see some of the details that you filled in up front, right? So incorporation status, company size, annual revenue, these are things you fill in when you're building your account, and you can actually change these. So let's say you're really early days and you're not incorporated when you sign up for Pocketed. That's fine. You can sign up. You'll get a list of matches, a smaller list than what I saw here, 155 programs. When you eventually incorporate, you can actually come in, edit that, change it to incorporated status, and you get a brand new list of funding opportunities specific to your business at that stage. So we can see very quickly here that Pocketed is a super powerful tool, obviously a free tool that you can leverage to find these opportunities and apply to these opportunities. And then, of course, access the support that you need if you can't apply or you don't want to apply on your own. Now I see we have some messages in the chat. Okay, perfect. So Jim, yeah. So I think Katherine already addressed that. So the link that's in there will automatically apply the code for you. Oh, and if you've already created an account, then you can reach out to us. Great. And then we've got two last questions here. Do you support to claim Shred? If so, what does it cost? Yes. So the cool thing is we have our internal team of grant writers and we support with a specific subset of grants, but we also have a vendor network. So we work with some of the top grant writing institutions and tax credit institutions in Canada, and they can actually help you with any of the programs that we have on the platform. So for Shred, we have some great teams. Think Shred is out east. We work with Boast AI as well. And if you need support in your Shred claim, they will be able to help you. Now, they typically have their fees as a portion of the Shred claim that you are applying for. It's typically somewhat small. I think on like, if you're submitting a claim for like $150,000 or something like that, the actual claim size itself, like the fee that you would pay, is maybe around $10,000 or a little bit less than that. I think it's a pretty small portion of that. And I'd have to confirm, it's just not coming to me right now, but we definitely support with Shred claims. And the fees are reasonable there. Can you further filter on open grants? Bert, great question. We've actually had this question a ton over the past 12 months of being on the market. So there is no open grants filter right now, but it is on our tech team's radar. And so that will be coming, right? We'll be adding more and more filters as we continue to scale and grow and get feedback from our users. But that's a really good catch. For those of you who didn't notice, it does show you both open and closed programs. That's intentional. The reason for that is because programs will open, close, and reopen throughout the year. And so we want you to know, right? We spoke about deadlines, knowing what's going to open up in the future. We want you to know what's available, no matter if it's closed or open, so that when it does open, you are prepared to apply. The other cool thing is we have notifications in that Pocketed Plus tier. So if you do upgrade, that's where you'll get notifications for when some of these programs that you've matched with are opening again. Okay, so that is the Pocketed platform, a quick walkthrough, and I'll drop the link in the chat again just so that it didn't get buried underneath everything else. But I'm going to pass it back to Katherine, who will go through a few things, a few specific things that you can access through Pocketed.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. And we've had a couple people reach out to us before I dive into Pocketed services about applying the code for those who have already signed up for Pocketed. Allison, feel free to send us an email, and our emails will be included at the end of these slides. Just reach out to us directly with the email that you use to sign up for Pocketed, and we'll make sure we apply that code to you if you've already created an account. Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the different ways that Pocketed actually helps our users secure funding. So Pocketed goes beyond just our platform. We also help our users actively secure funding in a few different ways. Okay, so the first way is through our wonderful managed solution. This is our automated process where we proactively find grants that align with our users' goals. We then apply for that funding, and we finally reach out to our users with money. It's super straightforward on your end. All you have to do is say yes, let us know you're interested. We'll be in touch with you to discuss next steps and get a good understanding of your business goals, and we will then go out and apply for funding that aligns with these business goals. So next up, we have got our consultations. So these are one-on-one consultations that you can book with a grant specialist. This will allow us to gain a better understanding of your business goals and will allow us to map out a custom fit grant strategy. I know that Ben really touched upon our Pocketed Plus platform, but one of the perks that you get from utilizing our Pocketed Plus platform is you actually get unlimited consultations with the grant strategy team. So anytime you have a question or you need a grant consultation, you will have a link to directly book with our team to have a custom conversation about your business and your funding goals. Perfect. Okay, so in order to do all of this, Pocketed does require a little bit of information from your end. In terms of actually setting up Pocketed, we will need your basic operational information. So this will include, for example, your business name, your registration number, of course, your industry, and we need this information so that the platform can intelligently actually show your list of grant matches. Of course, for our services such as our consultations and managed solution, we will also need to know about your business goals so we can make sure that we are directing you appropriately. And then our managed solution will require a little bit extra information, and that will differ depending on what we're applying for you. So if your business goal is to, let's say, revamp your website, we would need to know what type of role you're looking to hire and what type of person you want to fill that role. So do you want a student? Do you want someone that's no longer a student? So our managed solution, like I said, will require a little bit of extra information. So I know that sharing this information can be a little daunting in the world of technology where there are sometimes data breaches, but not to worry, your information with Pocketed is safe. While Ben and I are by no means part of the technical team or tech experts, as much as I like to think myself as technologically savvy, Pocketed has hired a professional security firm and is following best practices. We've got a list here of the different security features we have implemented, but if you have any specific questions about this, please email us and I'll pop it in the chat here where you can email us and we'll direct it to our tech expert team so that they can properly answer those questions for you. And I'm just going to pop that email in the chat. Perfect. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for running through that, Katherine. And yeah, by all means, like Katherine and I are not technical or tech safety experts, but I know that Mickey, you had asked that we just quickly kind of touch on that today so that everyone knows that obviously we're following best practices and that, you know, when you are sharing this information, it is secure. So thanks for running through that really quickly, Katherine. All right. So just to run these back on the slide here now, I would encourage you all, after hearing all about non-dilutive funding today, exploring the Pocketed platform a little bit with us, I would encourage you to sign up, right? It's totally free. That link in the chat, I can still see it on my end. So I think all of you should be able to see it as well. It will apply that Innovation Guelph X code. The perks that you're going to get with that, right? So one, you're going to get a free grant consultation to start off with. So even if you sign up for a basic tier, right? So just that free tier, our consultations are typically $50 a call, but you'll get it completely free when you have that code on your account. You get the 25% upgrade, or sorry, the 25% off upgrades to Pocketed Plus. So another good perk there. And we actually have a special third perk that we haven't really launched publicly yet. So this is coming to you all fresh, okay? Some of our partner networks haven't even received this yet. When you opt in to our managed solution, so that is when you say upfront, okay, Pocketed, I give you permission to apply to grants on my behalf. In the background, you don't have to ask me every single time. When you opt in and you utilize your first grant, you will receive 50% off eligible service fees for that grant. So that's 50% off your first grant that you utilize and leverage through the managed solution. So definitely worth signing up with the Innovation Guelph X code because it's going to get you those 3 perks, 2 of which you can use even if you're using the free platform. And all you have to do is visit that link and it'll automatically apply. So we hope to see many, hopefully all of you, all 44 that are still on the call, on the platform in the coming days here. Okay, so thank you all so much for sitting through all this fantastic content with us today. We are now going to stop and take some time for Q&A. I know we've been addressing questions throughout the session, but if there's anything we want to go back on, if there's anything specific that people want to come up and bring up right now, then now is the time to do so.
There's two questions I know for sure that we didn't get a chance to answer yet, and then I bear with me as I go through the other ones to make sure. Our first question that didn't get answered was from Jacob, and he asked, are there grants available or support available for building a project and creating a project that you are trying to get a grant for? Yeah,
that is a really good question. So what I'm kind of hearing that as is, if you have a project in mind, but you haven't quite developed it out yet, you haven't quite figured out your scope of project, is there support for that? So grant writers can definitely help you to an extent. Right now, obviously, you're going to have some kind of an idea of what is it that you want to be executing, what do you want to be working on. But if you need support with actually writing the proposal, those types of things, like that is what grant writers are there to help with. And in that case, obviously, you'd be paying like the fees to the grant writer for the application support. But that is totally what they're there to help with, to help you flesh out your project proposals and those types of things so that you can actually be successful.
Awesome, thank you. We have two questions that we didn't get answered from Henry. So Henry's first question was, are there grants available to help pay myself as the entrepreneur? And the second question is, are there grants available for the plant-based food industry?
Right. Okay. So first of all, great question about like paying yourself with a grant. Now, full transparency, there's not a lot of opportunity for that. Most hiring grants, which is where you're actually going to be able to cover wage expenses, are going to be for a new position, right? So we spoke about stimulating economic growth, stimulating job growth, right? They want you to be basically building out your team, building out more employees. So there isn't too much for that. What I will say, one program that you can potentially use to fund yourself, or at least like one of your founding team members, or one of your founding team executives, is the IRAP program. The IRAP program you can actually use to fund like a CTO. So obviously that's a pretty high level senior experience role. And so you could leverage that for something like, executive level, or if you're the CTO yourself, then you can potentially do that. So unfortunately, not a ton of opportunities there, but maybe one if you are a CTO.
Thank you. Question from Douglas that I don't think we got answered. Douglas has an early stage startup in the food and bev industry, having issues accessing specific ingredients that could be solved by developing their own vertical growing in Canada. Does vertical growing fall under any of our grants opportunities that we talked about?
So what we spoke about today, and Katherine, you can hop in as well. Not sure if it would fall under any of those programs, but that does not mean there's no programs. There are definitely programs for what you're working on. Agri-insurance might work. Don't quote me, maybe Katherine can clarify, but definitely like there are some R&D programs that you can leverage if you're building like new tech or new verticals in your own business. So yeah, I mean, you have like a prime project to access funding. Just like hearing back those details. I just don't know. Definitely like career ready would not be right for you. The CWN would also not be right for you, but the agri-insurance might work. I don't think CanExport would be good. So
yeah, exactly what Ben said. There's a lot of funding out there for this, and research and development would be a great place to start for sure.
Awesome. Going back to how grants can close and reopen and continue that cycle, is there a feature in the filtering that indicates when the grant is reopened? Do you get notified, or is this just something you'd have to naturally notice?
Yeah, so I think I briefly touched on this. So that's going to be part of our Pocketed Plus tier. So when you upgrade to the paid version, you will get alerts. So when you have a program saved, or when a new program is open to your platform, open on your platform, then you will get notified directly so that you can go in and apply. But if you're just on the basic version, you would have to keep track of that yourself.
Okay. Do you have any stats on the success rates for grants submitted and applied to via Pocketed, and also ones that used a grant writer?
Yes, we do. And Katherine, maybe you can hop in as well. So the interesting thing is that for our grants that we apply to internally, we typically apply to grant programs that have like two stages of applications. So they're going to have stage one, which is your like pre-approval stage. And for our pre-approval stage, we have effectively almost 100% approval rate on that. Because typically we're able to get all of our companies pre-approved on the projects, the eligible projects that they're applying for. And then where we do see some drop off would be after at stage two, when we're adding further variables such as like for hiring, like finding the right employee, finding the right student intern to actually access and leverage those funds.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that question, does Pocketed or the grant writer provide any feedback for failed and rejected applications?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's great. So actually what's cool is we actually have like some of our writers provide like review sessions and recaps on like what went wrong. So that's a great way to like, restructure and refocus for further like, future applications that you may be wanting to submit.
Yeah, definitely. And on the rare case that we do have applications not be approved through our managed solution, we always offer an alternative as well. So we'll usually go over the reasons why it was declined, and then we'll have an alternative that will be a better fit to prevent that from happening again.
Excellent, thank you. I do see hands raised. I'm going to do, I'll do one or two more chat box questions, and then we'll switch to some hands that are up, okay? Would hiring a student to do digital marketing work, website SEO, Google Ads, social media be considered a tech-focused role?
Definitely, yes, it would.
Excellent.
So a lot of people think that the roles that saying that they need to be in a tech role really limits them to any just people in IT specifically, but it doesn't. So any role that is dealing with, let's say, CRM systems, for example, or dealing with pretty much any type of technology would count as a digital role.
Excellent, thanks. I'm just seeing that you are replying in the chat to some questions, Katherine. My apologies. Okay, let's go to Allison. She has her hand up, and then I'll take a look at the chat box again and see what has been answered, and then we'll go to Jacob after Allison. So go ahead, Allison.
Hi there. I received one of your promotional emails recently for the Shred program, and I did the steps that was required to do. There was a very short form that I had to fill out, and I received the email saying somebody would be in touch with me now. So I just wondered if you could elaborate on what I should be expecting and by when.
Yeah, so I mean, Katherine and her team definitely oversee the managed solution process, but I'll just hop in since I also know about it. So once you submit all your information, you opt in that first stage one of the managed solution, you can expect to hear from the team within 7 days with either or information on next steps. So if there's any additional information needed from you or approval on your first grant. So we had a ton of individuals in the past like 2 weeks opt in, and within the first 7 days, they would have heard back with pre-approval on their first grant opportunity. And then beyond that, you can expect to receive pre-approval for a grant 1 per quarter. So that's at least one. Some quarters it may be more than that. And so that's what the process looks like moving forward.
Awesome.
And actually, one more note, Allison, because I did receive just a personal message from a user who said, "Hey, it's been 7 days and I don't think I've heard anything." Sometimes make sure just like check your junk because some of those messages are coming out from like our pocketed system. So make sure that if you haven't heard anything and you think, "Hey, like where's pocketed at?" Check your junk because it may have landed there, and that was the case just with one of our users last week.
Okay, yeah, it was coming into my promotional folder in my Gmail, so I did check there.
Right.
So do you guys directly help with the shred application process, or is that facilitated by an outside partner?
Yeah, so that's facilitated by one of our outside partners. So I mentioned a few earlier. We've got ThinkShred over on the East Coast. They also work with organizations like the DMZ, for example. And then we also have Boast AI, which is a big North American company. So it's not internal, but you can access them through us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Thanks, Jordan. This has been a super helpful session, so thank you, Ben and Katherine. I had a couple questions. I'm hoping to keep them concise. They're mostly just following up on the questions that I asked earlier. So just quickly, when I asked about whether the website would show, like you were saying, the website shows if grants are open or closed. Without getting like the plus, for example, is there any plan or any way that like, just when you're looking at grants, because you see all the open and closed, just to indicate that like this grant may reopen or something, you know what I mean? Just like an indicator when you're kind of guiding yourself.
Yeah, so that's not in the platform right now, but Jacob, like this is fantastic feedback. And obviously like we're still a young startup company. We're continuing to grow and develop our product, and like we want to build the best product for our users. So like, as I said, there is work to develop an open close filter. And then beyond that, like that's an interesting thing, like maybe just a little note that says, hey, this is going to be reopening soon. So I can definitely take that back to the tech team. Katherine and I can take that back and chat with them about that to see if that's on their radar already. And if it's not, then put it on their radar.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Two other quick questions. One, when I was asking about market expansion projects in general, it's just like I don't export anything. I focus on delivering locally. So can market expansion projects be considered, like, can you get grants for market expansion projects that aren't export related?
Yeah, so great question. I believe the CanExport program like is specifically for exports to international markets, but there are other export programs, like other export opportunities, market expansion opportunities, that will allow you to do like within Canada to a new region or a new market in the country or in the province. Now, it may not be as much funding as is available through a big program like CanExport, but there are some opportunities for that.
I guess the question here is, does market refer to like, are you talking about a region, or can market refer to different industry? Like, what if I want to start selling to industrial, like hospitals, for example, or like, can that be a market expansion in that way? Are there those types of projects rather than I want to start selling to BC or what, you know, whatever?
Yeah, and Katherine, feel free to hop in. A lot of the programs that like I'm like just personally familiar with on the market expansion side are definitely like regional expansion opportunities. Katherine, you can hop in. I mean, some things you may be able to leverage for that. Like, I'm trying to think if there's a way you can maybe frame an R&D program to support with that work, but I don't know, Katherine, do you have any further insight?
Yeah, you definitely can leverage it to say that you're reaching a new demographic. Like Ben said, the CanExport grant is specifically for international exportation, but there are grants available that you can pivot it, and a grant writer would be able to help you do this, where you would be applying so that you can get funding to reach a new demographic or a new industry.
Great. Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you. And then lastly, quickly, just when I ask my question about projects, is like, what if I don't even know what kind of projects I can develop, or then if I have a project, you know, if I have a larger idea, you know, how to kind of flesh out that project and kind of name things that will help secure a grant, right? Like, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense. And I'm actually glad that you brought this up again, because it didn't click with me earlier when we were first chatting about it. We actually have a partner, CanSalta. They're another small startup company in Canada, a consulting agency, and they could potentially help you with developing a project and developing a scope of work for what you may want to do in your business. So that would be a little bit different than like what our grant writers would be doing. But it's kind of cool. Like, so we work with some like B2B businesses like that, right? So CanSalta is one of our partners. We work with the cool company Good Lawyer. They have legal support. we work with another cool company called Deck Links. They actually have some pretty cool ways to build out some sales decks and pitch decks. So Jacob, like I would say, let's maybe make an intro to Consulta. You can at least take a look at who they are and if you want to have a conversation with them. But then that would be an opportunity for you to go to them, say, hey, this is what's going on in my business. What can we do? And then you can come back and then find a grant for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
I'll jump in with something too, because Jacob, like at Innovation Guelph, we have lots of mentors and industry specialists. So if there's something that you're questioning or want to kind of flesh out with someone, then come to Jordan and I. We can kind of see what we can do with your mentor, or kind of reaching out to the team that we have here too, so we can help with those kinds of things too.
For sure. Thanks.
I'm going to have to wrap the call. I know there's more questions. Jordan, how did you want to deal with that afterwards?
I've taken note of all of the questions asked today, so I'll be able to tell which ones we haven't answered. And yeah, we'll wrap just to be cognizant of our lovely presenters' time. But I think we'll send a follow-up email to Ben and Katherine, and they can just jot down some answers to our unanswered questions. And then we'll just include all of those answers in our follow-up email in 1 to 2 business days with a recording of the session. We'll include another referral link to register for Pocketed, and presentation slides will also be included. That's the third thing. So that'll come in a couple of days with the answers to all these questions. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Ben and Katherine. Thank you to our lovely ASL interpreters, and of course to our sponsors and all of you for sticking around. Appreciate you all asking questions and staying engaged. If you have anything to follow up, you can always reach out to any of us, and we'll get back to you. Super interested to hear how you think about today's session and any upcoming sessions of Toolkit Tuesday. Is there anything that you are looking forward to that you would like to see presented before you log off? There is a feedback form we'll ask you to fill out. If you can't do it today, that is okay. We'll also include the link to the form in the follow-up email. So please do please do provide your feedback so that we can continue offering some really cool and very valuable sessions to you each month. Anyhow, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon and take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Loves being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mickey. Thanks, Jordan. And thanks, everyone. Email's on the screen if you want to reach out. See you soon.
Take care.